July was a pretty wild month in the world of AI, and I thought it would be a good idea to just round up all of the important news stories that happened in July, specifically for writers. There's, of course, tons of AI news in imaging, in video creation, in gaming, and I'm not really going to talk about those today. I'm just talking about the little bits that are particularly important for AI assisted authors. Let's get into it. All right, first news story that I wanted to highlight here is that at the beginning of the month, we found out that Google said it's going to scrape everything you post online to use in their AI. And I think this just goes back to the fact that these companies are not worried about the legal implications of the way they are currently using AI. And no doubt Google has a huge legal team. And for them to come out and say this publicly, it's pretty crazy. Now, granted, this wasn't like an official announcement or anything. It says, right here, it says an update to Google's privacy policy suggests that the entire public internet is fair game for its AI projects. But at the same time, they're not necessarily making this quiet either. And so it just goes to show you, if you are worried about AI, then you should just not have your writing available anywhere on the internet. Don't publish it, don't anything. And this is just the world we live in. And that is scary. I'll admit that is scary. But at the same time, if everyone is treated the same, then we're really all on the same playing field. And so, yes, there's a lot of weird stuff going on with AI and a lot of legally gray areas to continue to be fleshed out. But I think it's telling that big companies like Google don't seem to care. So that's interesting. Next, we had the announcement that ChatGPT Plus users would get access to Code Interpreter. This happened early in July. And I just did a video on Code Interpreter, so definitely go check that out if you're interested in how it applies to writers. Basically, it makes it easier for you to upload a document and then interact with the document in some way. There are a lot of other cool things that it does that aren't as applicable to writers, but it is a very cool function available in ChatGPT Plus that you should definitely check out if you're subscribed to ChatGPT Plus. Next, we actually found out that ChatGPT saw a fall in traffic by 10% in June, which is an interesting thing to see there. So it kind of hit its plateau and now it's sort of leveling out. And this was, of course, expected to happen at some point. ChatGPT is still one of the fastest growing platforms ever. And so this isn't necessarily bad news or anything. It's not to say that it's, failing or anything like that, but it's definitely still the market leader, I believe, and definitely still doing well. But we did finally hit that sort of market saturation point. So we'll see things either continue to slowly decline for a little while and then start to go back up. Or we don't know exactly. This world is changing so fast. ChatGPT could come up with another update and change the game altogether. So we don't know. But that was interesting to see that report. All right, a big one for authors is this news that Sarah Silverman and a couple of other people, I believe, were suing OpenAI and Meta for copyright infringement. Now, there's a lot of misinformation going around. And sometimes it's kind of difficult to know what exactly is going on. But as I understand it, and I am not a copyright lawyer for any particular, in any sense of the word, so don't necessarily quote me. But as I understand it, these people are claiming that OpenAI crawled databases of pirated books. So say it went to, I don't know, the Pirate Bay or wherever you get your pirated books these days, and it crawled those and it got the books from that. Instead of using it through a more legal means, which I'm not sure what the difference is, honestly. I don't see how it would make a difference to Sarah Silverman and the others if the AI was trained on their books through a legally obtained copy or an illegally obtained copy. I don't really see why the difference there, because it's still, the end result is still the same. But they're claiming that if it was done through one of these pirated sites, that is a copyright infringement. And so we've since seen evidence that the judge really doesn't have like they're about to throw out the case because they don't appear to have very good evidence. And because the evidence that they cite, and you can see some of that in this article, by the way, there will be links to all of these articles below. Um, the evidence appears to be because it can produce summaries and portions of their work accurately. Now, the problem with this is if the AI has crawled the web in a lot of its training data, which it almost certainly has, most of that information, even if it didn't crawl the actual books in question, it would still be able to produce summaries and guides and information about the books generally because it has already crawled the internet, and there's a lot of that information just publicly available that was not pirated, not scraped. And so it's a really tricky case. I honestly don't see that they have much hope in it. But it'll be interesting to see how it works out because all of these lawsuits, everything that's happening here they're important to keep an eye on because this is how the precedents are going to be set going forward for how we legally treat AI in the future. So keep an eye on it. All right, the biggest news, arguably, of the month in July was the launch of Claude 2 by Anthropic and their own chatbot in the style of ChatGPT to go along with it. Now, currently, this is still only available in the US and the UK. I imagine that will be changing soon, but for now, it's only available in US and UK. But this was a really big deal because authors who have been in this space for a little while know that Claude is one of the better language models, especially for writing prose, because it actually does a really good job with language. All of that flowery prose that you get from ChatGPT, which is really common, I'm sure it'll be gone in GPT-5 or something, but the style you get out of ChatGPT can be often a little grinding. And what we get out of Claude is a lot better. Not perfect, but a lot better. And this was a way, just a much better way for authors to interact with Claude using this particular chatbot. Plus, it was an updated model, so it was even better. And it had 100K tokens, which means it could read most of your book and answer questions about it. And really cool way to interact with it. And now this is one of my preferred models. I use it more than ChatGPT these days. I still have both, mostly because I'm an influencer in this space. But if I had to pick between Claude and ChatGPT, I'd pick Claude without question. There are reasons why certain areas where ChatGPT is better, but Claude is really, really good. And so that release, I think, was the big one. And a lot of the news that we've gotten since then, I think, is due to the fact that Claude came out with this update and suddenly got everybody on their toes again and started pushing out updates. And so that, I think, was really cool. Moving on. So Shopify, this isn't a huge update for authors, but Shopify did announce that they had this new feature, this new AI feature that allows it to help you create different products and basically all of the administrative things that you have to do in Shopify. Is just a way of helping with that. I haven't been playing with it yet currently, even though I do have a Shopify store. But anyone who has been in the direct selling space, meaning if you are trying to sell your own books on your own store, are probably familiar with Shopify in some form. And tools like this are being integrated everywhere, virtually every platform, just to make things easier for that platform. And I think you'll find that AI is just going to become the norm. You're going to see integrations like this everywhere with everything. And so kind of cool news to see here. Another one related to OpenAI that I thought was worth a mention is that OpenAI and Associated Press announced a partnership to train the AI on their news articles. Now, this was really interesting. I assume that OpenAI has been training their news articles on or training their AI on various news articles from various outlets. But now we are starting to see that these outlets are realizing that there is money to be made by creating partnerships with OpenAI and these other companies, and probably even more money to be made if they form exclusive partnerships. So I don't know the details of this particular partnership, but it would be interesting to see if it was exclusive, like only AI could use that data, and Anthropic couldn't use it or Google couldn't use it. That would be a very interesting case if that were the case. And so this is the thing about scraping the internet. Everyone talks about how the AI is scraping the internet and stealing all our stuff. Well, you're going to start to see things like this rather than the law trying to come down and ban those things. You're going to see more things like this where people just realize that there is money to be made, and so they start making deals. And the economics of that are still up in the air. We're not sure how it's going to work. Is it going to increase prices for things like OpenAI? Is it going to not make much of a difference? That's all still up in the air. A lot of things moving, but still interesting to see. Next, we got some updates to Bard. Now, I haven't actually done a video on this or done too much digging into it because from what I've heard, it's still not up to the level of Claude or ChatGPT, but Bard has been receiving updates from Google. I expect at some point it will be pretty good and you could still use it in place of ChatGPT or Claude. Right now, we are at this beginning phase where it is easy to see which ones are the better ones, but at some point, I guess like within a year, all of these models, any one of them could work. They're all going to be good enough. And there might be some subtle differences between the two, and you might have your own preferred favorites, but I really do think that at some point it's not really going to matter. So while I say I would pick Claude now, if I could only pick one now, that will probably be different in another year or so, because they're always pushing out updates like this. And so Bard, while still probably not perfect for writers, it is getting better, and they're all getting better, and eventually we're not going to be able to tell the difference between them. And next we have a partnership between Microsoft and Meta, which was surprising to a lot of people. They partnered on this Meta's own language model called Llama 2, which is now essentially open source. And you can now get it through various platforms like Hugging Face, and a few others have access to Llama 2. It's also, this is another reason why another one that I didn't make a full video on, because it's also not quite there yet for authors. But the fact that this is an open source platform and it's getting good, these open source platforms are getting good, that is really interesting for the future of AI, because eventually we're going to get to a point where anyone can install an open source platform onto their laptop and just create stuff from there without any connection to the internet. And that's a little bit of a scary thought, but it's kind of the last nail in the coffin for the people that think that there's some way to turn AI around and to keep it from stealing your books, because at some point anybody's going to be able to download it and use it and not be reliant on OpenAI or Anthropic or Google. They can just do it from their own laptop. And who's to say what they've trained that localized version of the AI on? It could be your books. It could be their own books. I'm sure there will be legal precedents set forth, but how those precedents are going to be rather hard to enforce, I believe. So cool stuff happening in the open source AI space. But, and it's also interesting to note that Microsoft is involved in this partnership, because Microsoft is, of course, the biggest investor in OpenAI. And so it looks like Microsoft is kind of hedging their bets a little bit with OpenAI. So they're not reliant on just one AI platform. They're working with Meta now with Llama 2. So interesting development. We'll keep an eye on it for sure. All right, next we have custom instructions were added to ChatGPT. I did do a video on this one because it's pretty big. It's something we wanted for a while, but now basically you can have information about your style, for example, or anything you want the AI to remember for the entire chat. just have it always remember that thing so it never forgets. Because often if we're working in ChatGPT, we'll give it instructions, we'll tell it to do the thing, and then eventually it'll forget those initial instructions. And this is a way to kind of have it remember those instructions all the time. It's not perfect. There's a character count for it, and it would be nice if you could add a higher character count there, but currently you can't. But this was a pretty big news here for ChatGPT. Big update. And going along with that update, we also got a double the message limit for those who have ChatGPT Plus. Previously, those who were subscribed to ChatGPT Plus were only able to use GPT-4 for a total of 25 messages every 3 hours. And now that has doubled to 50 messages every 3 hours, which should be enough for most people, in my opinion. I have currently not hit that limit yet. I hit the 25 limit multiple times, but I haven't hit the 50 limit yet. So that's also big news. That came out around the same time as the custom instructions. And next we have the news that a U.S. judge found flaws in an artist's lawsuit against AI companies. Now, this is not the same group of people, but with Sarah Silverman, who was suing OpenAI. These were claims against art generators, but still kind of relevant. Basically, the judge said here that they needed to provide more facts about the copyright infringement, because otherwise it seems implausible that their works are involved, noting the systems have been trained on 5 billion compressed images, which is basically what we as AI users have been saying for a long time. It's not reproducing anything. It is being trained on something, then throwing that thing away, and now it understands like the mathematics of the thing it was trained on. And everything it produces is 100% original. And yes, if you trained it on just work from that one person and that was all it was trained on, it would look very similar. But even then, it would never be exactly the same thing. And so the debate in court is whether or not that's a derivative product or whether or not it's, I don't know the legalese for it, but there are ways in which it could be argued either way. But basically, they don't have facts. They don't have ways to prove that what they are saying is true. And this is the problem with AI art and AI language models, is that it's really hard to prove that there's been any kind of infraction on copyright, because everything appears to be, at least with our current legal systems, in fair use. And so, again, it's important to monitor these court cases because they're going to be setting a huge precedent for what happens going forward. All right, next was this story that a study is claiming that ChatGPT is losing capability, but some experts aren't convinced. And basically the gist of this article is that there was a study that came out that showed that ChatGPT was performing worse now than it did when GPT-4 was first released. And the reason why it says here that some experts aren't convinced is because most of these tests that it was being subjected to were all mathematical in nature. And ChatGPT is not a math tool. It is a language model. And so it really should be judged more on the expertise of the language. That said, it does appear that there are some things that have gotten worse. OpenAI says they're not aware of the issues, but they're aware of the allegations and that they are looking into it, basically. I don't think that OpenAI has done anything under the hood to try and make it cheaper for them or anything that would intentionally worsen the quality. Maybe I'm being naive by saying that, but I really don't think, I feel like they would have said something, even if it was just like, we're testing out a few things to save on costs, like that would have been fine. People would have understood. So we'll see. It's interesting to see how it's going. Personally, I have not found any difference really in how well it is writing now compared to how well it used to write. In fact, if anything, it's gotten better, because I remember I looked at a couple of articles I wrote for my own website a little while back, right after GPT-4 came out, and looking at them now with my slightly more trained eye on what to look for, It looks kind of worse than it used to. So I think a lot of it is this phenomenon that happens where when the new thing comes out, it's like, oh, it's so cool, it's shiny, and then once we get used to it, suddenly we start to realize all the flaws in it, and it appears worse, even though it really was that bad the whole time. And that's a normal like psychological phenomenon that happens. Next, speaking of open source models, Stability AI released Stable Beluga and Stable Beluga 2, which were these large language models formerly called Free Willy. And basically, these are their own models. And again, I didn't make a video on this because it's still not really there enough for authors to take advantage of. But it's important to watch these developments because eventually these open source models are going to catch up and be just as good as the giant models. In my opinion, I believe that's where we're going. They're not there yet, but they're making headway. Between this and Llama 2, I think we're going to see some really interesting developments come to the forefront. Next, towards the end of the month, we found out that OpenAI actually shut down its AI detection tool because it was consistently inaccurate. If we look at the subheadline here, it says, "Dashing the hopes of educators, OpenAI decommissions its AI classifier due to poor accuracy." And this is the thing about AI detecting tools. And I use some of them. I use originality.ai for some things just to check how well it's doing. And the problem with them is that they often reveal false positives. So even if you didn't use AI in your prose, it will still show as using AI. If you put the Bible in there, it will show that the Bible was written by AI, or any book for that matter. If you put the Constitution in there, there's been all kinds of examples. And sometimes these tools can get a little better and better. But the fact is, it's a very slippery science to get it to be perfect, and I don't think it ever will be perfect. And I think we're just going to have to accept the fact that AI is here and people are going to use it, and we can't rely on detection tools to analyze it. And for those also worried about Google de-ranking your content or something like that because you used AI in your content, I wouldn't worry about that too much. As long as you're creating quality content, which Google is great at detecting what is quality content and what isn't, then you should be good to go. I wouldn't worry about AI detection in that. But this was interesting. It happened really quietly. OpenAI did not make any announcement about it or anything. People just sort of noticed that it was gone. And so, yeah, that's interesting. All right, next, ChatGPT. We've had an app for ChatGPT for a while if you use Apple devices, but now ChatGPT is rolling out their Android app. So if you use Android, you should, I believe, especially by now, you should have access to that in most countries. And this article says in 4 countries, but I know that they have since rolled it out into a lot of other different countries as well. So that's exciting if you use Android. And last but not least, we had an announcement from 11 Labs that they are introducing new, crisp, and diverse default voices. Now, 11 Labs is hands down the undisputed king right now of AI text to voice. Their voices are incredible, and you can create your own voices. And when you're creating your own voices, whether based on a voice that you input yourself or just a randomly generated voice, it can be a little hit or miss. But the default voices that they come with are all pretty good. And so now we have a whole lot more of them, and they're a little more diverse in different accents and things like that. Also, not mentioned in this article, but something that's kind of new is they're having this ability to create projects, which makes it much more intuitive on how to create like longer chapters and have the AI read the whole chapter. And you can even select bits of text and have it read that text in a different voice. So you can have like a whole audio drama kind of thing. And that's now available for some people. And now I personally don't have access to that yet. As soon as I do, I will make a video about it because it's pretty cool. And that is it for the number of news stories. It's a lot. And I'll have links to all of these down below. But a lot of news happened in June. And let me know if you liked this video. And if you want me to continue at the end of August, I can do another one for all of the news that dropped in August. And then just continue on from there. I will, of course, continue to make the important videos, any really breaking news that's really relevant for authors, I will make a whole video about that as it comes out. So don't worry about that. But I thought this video would be a nice way to round up all of the other news that wasn't really deserving of a whole video in and of itself, but is still kind of important to look at to keep your your finger on the pulse of AI in writing. So let me know, and I will see you in the next video.